Anthony Joshua's next fight will be on May 9th against Brazilian journeyman Raphael Zumbano Love. Now, I've seen Zumbano Love fight a few times. I saw him fight in June last year against Shannon Briggs, and that fight went the distance. Briggs won a 12-round unanimous decision. And Zumbano Love was in survival mode for the whole fight. He was obviously very intimidated by just the look of Shannon Briggs and Briggs' aggression. I mean, even now, even though Briggs is way over the hill, he's still hyper aggressive in the early rounds, like he always was, even in his prime. He was always hyper aggressive early on. And Briggs, for those who don't know, I've said this many times, Briggs has got more first round knockouts than any other heavyweight champion in history, including Mike Tyson. Okay, Briggs was always very aggressive early in fights. Just ask Lennox Lewis. And he was the same against Zumbano Love. He came out throwing the kitchen sink at Zumbano Love, and Love had to absorb some wicked punches. As over the hill as Briggs is, he can still bang. And he hit Zumbano Love with very heavy shots. If you ain't seen it, just go look it up on YouTube. Shannon Briggs versus Raphael Zumbano Love. Just go watch the first round alone and you'll see what I'm talking about. Zumbano Love absorbed wicked shots, so he's definitely got a chin. He's tough. And he managed to go the distance. I believe he was dropped late in that fight. If I remember rightly, it was maybe the 10th, 11th, 12th round. Around that time, he was dropped. But he got up and survived. So in that fight, he showed he had survival skills. When he goes into his shell and tries to survive, he can go the distance. And he showed he had a chin. Now, since then, he's picked up a couple wins and a couple losses. 2 wins, 2 losses since his fight with Shannon Briggs. His 2 losses both came this year. One of them was to Eric Molina, who's kind of a fringe contender who lost to Chris Arreola. And another guy is to an undefeated, another loss was to an undefeated prospect called Charles Martin. Now, the Molina fight I saw, and that was different than the Briggs fight because Zumbano Love actually tried to win in the Molina fight. He wasn't just there to survive. But because he tried to win, that gave Molina more opportunities to land than Shannon Briggs had. So Molina was able to take advantage of those opportunities and counter and capitalize on Zumbano Love's mistakes. And he managed to get an 8th round TKO. Zumbano Love didn't go down. He was stopped on his feet. The referee came in and stopped him, prevented him from taking further punishment. He didn't like the stoppage, but it was what it was. He, again, in the Molina fight, showed he's tough. His next fight was against Charles Martin, which was his next loss. I didn't see the Charles Martin fight. I ain't managed to locate any footage of it online. But apparently he was knocked out in the 10th round. Not a TKO, a clean knockout. So although he does have a good chin, because I've seen him take good shots, he can be knocked out. And psychologically, has he recovered enough in just a couple months to be able to absorb the kind of punches Anthony Joshua is going to be throwing at him? You know, we'll see. And maybe he'll go into survival mode just because of the size of Joshua. He's also an intimidating physical presence in the ring. Maybe he'll go into survival mode and it'll be more like the Briggs fight where he's just there moving around and not really trying to win. And if he does, there's the possibility that he could take Joshua a few rounds here because he's got the toughness, he's got the survival skills. I think it's only an 8-rounder against Joshua. So maybe he can go the 8 if he really goes into survival mode. We'll see. Now, there's a long line of people criticizing Joshua's opponents. They're saying Joshua should be stepping up. He should be fighting this guy, this, that, the other guy. Nonsense. There's a screenshot on your screen right now, right? It's of Floyd Mayweather's 11th fight. Joshua's had 11 fights. In Floyd Mayweather's 11th fight, he fought a guy with 18 losses. Okay, and Mayweather was a guy who had, what, nearly 100 amateur fights? Joshua had about 35 amateur fights. But yet people are expecting Joshua to be held up to a higher standard than Floyd Mayweather. Why is it that a guy like Floyd is fighting a guy with 18 losses in his 11th fight and no one's up in arms about that? But when Joshua does it, it's a scandal. I don't get it. You know, you move a guy along as quickly as he needs to be moved along. If he's still making mistakes, you keep him at a certain level, you refine his technique, you get him, you prepare him mentally and emotionally for the step up. That's the way it's done in boxing. There are very few fighters who are emotionally and technically mature enough to be moved extremely quickly. You know, you look at guys like Beterbiev and Lomachenko, Rigondeaux. These guys had hundreds and hundreds of amateur fights, and by the time they turned pro, I mean, they were already in their late 20s. So it's different with those guys and a guy like Joshua, who had very limited amateur experience and who's just a baby in boxing terms, particularly for the heavyweights. So there's nothing wrong with the quality of opposition they're picking for him at the moment. Nothing wrong with it at all. The only thing I would say, and I think is a fair comment, is that Eddie Hearn needs to keep his mouth shut and stop mentioning Joshua's name in the same sentence as a lot of these other top heavyweights, unless he's willing to put him in with those guys. But that's Eddie Hearn's problem. That's not Joshua's problem. That's not Joshua's fault. That's Eddie Hearn. Because when he starts mentioning Joshua next to people like Tyson Fury, David Haye, and all these other kind of people, saying that Joshua's going to go on to be one of the greatest heavyweights of all time and he's going to destroy Tyson Fury and Chisora and Price and all these guys, it creates expectation among boxing fans, you know? And also it puts added pressure on Anthony Joshua. I don't like it. I don't like the way that Eddie Hearn is putting Joshua in the spotlight so early on in his career. Most fighters can't handle it. Some fighters can. You do get extroverts who come along every now and again who absolutely relish all the limelight and they just take it all in their stride. And in fact, having all this hype and limelight around them actually seems to elevate their game. But those are very rare characters who are like that, who at a young age, I'm not talking about when they're mature, I'm talking about at a young age when they've only had like a handful of fights. It's very rare that guys like that, at such an immature stage of their career, can absorb all this fanfare and all this hype and take it in their stride. Normally it backfires. One way or another, that pressure and expectation gets to them and it's actually detrimental. You know, I much prefer the way that Joseph Parker, for example, how his career is being moved. He's been under the radar. They haven't been giving him a lot of fanfare. In fact, it's only now when he's had like, what, 14, 15 fights now, Joseph Parker, it's only now that they're introducing him as, they're trying to build him up as a star in his own country, because he's done his little apprenticeship now. He's fought in different countries in the world. He's fought former world champions and done this, that and the other, sparred with Klitschko. They brought him along under the radar. I prefer that method, that tried and tested method. It's better the way that they're doing it with Joseph Parker, in my opinion. Even Hughie Fury, I like the way that the Furies are bringing him along on the undercard, fighting on Tyson Fury's undercards, fighting in different countries and all this kind of stuff. I like the way he's been brought along. Don't introduce a guy as a star to the public until he's already at a certain level. You know, that's the way I feel about it, because that way you're going to shield your fighter from the pressure and you're not going to give the fans unrealistic expectations too soon. You know, or lofty expectations too soon, should I say. So I can understand people criticizing the way that Hearn is promoting Joshua, the way he's mentioning all these other name dropping all the time. I can understand people criticizing that, but you can't criticize the quality of opposition that Joshua's been fighting through 11 fights. How can you? Because if you do, you have to criticize Klitschko, because his first 11 fights weren't any better standard in terms of the opponents. Neither were Floyd Mayweather's. So where are you going with this? And those were guys with much more amateur experience than Joshua. So, you know, ain't nothing wrong with the quality of opposition he's fighting at the moment. We'll see what Zumbano Love can do. Maybe you can give him a few rounds of target practice against a tall opponent. We'll see. Drop your comments in the comment section below, people. It's your boy Hatman. I'm out.